Welcome to the Charlie Hornis Coaching Podcast, Breaking Burnout Barriers, the only podcast tackling the real talk about what's causing acute stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in women and real solutions. Now, here's your host, Master Certified Coach and Patriarchy Smashing Badass, Charlie Hornis. Let's get into it.
Hey friends, this is Charlie Hornis and welcome to the Charlie Hornis Coaching Studio and my podcast, Breaking Burnout Barriers. I'm so glad to be with you today. I don't know about you, but I had an awesome week. Working with my coaches has really significantly changed my life over the last several years. And I'm just really excited to share a lot of what I have learned and the practices that I have been doing with all of you out there who may be struggling with the same things that I struggled with. I really believe that my niche and my focus for coaching, at least right now, is helping self-identified women who are dealing with the same things that I dealt with in my professional field, which I learned much later after it began that it was unnecessary and preventable suffering, which I say all the time because that's exactly what it was. It's the gender bias gap that precedes us into our fields and disciplines, and a lot of us don't even know about it. You know, I was joking with someone the other day and I said, I'll be honest, I think myself, my generation, and several that are coming behind us, and not everybody, but many of us, we kind of thought that the whole women's liberation was defeated during the civil rights movement. We thought the bras were burned, Gloria Steinem, the whole thing. And a lot of us just haven't experienced it, especially those of us living in urban areas. And for me, it wasn't until I moved back to Texas that I actually experienced sexism and misogyny and socialized patriarchy. I didn't even know what any of that stuff was because it just wasn't my experience. And in that, I've been lucky. And I know that. I have been extremely lucky, but the last 15 years, I have not been. So I want to share something with you that when I learned about it, it was mind-blowing. Now, you probably know this, and that's great. But for those that don't, have you heard about amygdala hijacking? This is such a profound thing for women to learn about. So this is a cute word for dealing with the reactionary parasympathetic system in our bodies. This is our limbic system, our nervous system. This is basically our neurobiology. And I'm not going to talk about stuff that I don't understand. And I know a lot of science is still learning about this. So I'm going to stay in my lane over here. However, I have learned some pretty basic physiological explanations to what is happening to a lot of us physiologically out in the workplace. I'll give you an example. During the last 15 years of my career, I experienced a person, and we'll call him Mr. Bob Bear. Nothing against Bobs out there in the world. I just like the alliteration. Okay, so Mr. Bob Bear enjoyed coming into my office often, and I was in charge, and he would love to scream at me. And he would scream at me about the most ridiculous, unimportant little stuff. He would turn purple. The vein in his neck would throb and in his forehead. And he would just stomp around and be so angry. And I never understood what I did wrong. It didn't make any sense to me. And I'm not really a people pleaser by nature, but boy, did I become a people pleaser real quick. And every time he would come in, my heart would pound and I couldn't think straight and I couldn't come up with good responses. I would basically freeze. Now, we have fight and flight, and a lot of people relate to that. I'm a freezer. I figure if I don't move like a gazelle, then Mr. Bob Bear won't see me. What I learned later was about the neurobiology of our brains, that we have this primitive survival mechanism in our brains that runs through our amygdala, and it basically works to keep us alive. That's its job. That's its only job. And it could be wrong 99% of the time, but that one tiny fracture percent, it can't be wrong and it saves us. Then it did its job. Now, the rest of the time, it thinks Mr. Bob Bear is actually a bear that's going to eat me. And so what's called my HPA axis, when my brain feels like it's being threatened, this axis comes online and it does something to begin the survival mechanism, which is start pumping blood to my muscles. So my heart rate raises. I breathe faster because oxygen is going to my muscles so that I can either fight or flight. My brain decides in nanoseconds if I can win the fight or if I have to run away. So it prepares my body for that. And that's amazing, by the way, like nanoseconds, right? It's like, this hasn't happened to me, but I know it's happened to some of y'all, or you've heard about it, like somebody who jumps out of the way of a bus, an oncoming bus, and they don't even realize that they did it until after they're safe on the sidewalk. That is how fast our brains work to save us in survival mode. So before I could even think about what was happening with Mr. Bob Bear, I was already in the middle of what I thought was panic attacks. Well, for me, this was not panic attacks. Now, it does happen, obviously, to people, and mental health issues are a big deal. And if you feel like you're having mental health issues, you need to go see a certified and credentialed medical and mental health professional. But for me, it was not panic attacks. It was my survival mechanism coming online because it thought Mr. Bob Bear was a bear who was going to eat me. And I tried to blend into the curtains and the furniture. Now, it got so bad with Mr. Bob Bear that when I heard his voice in the hallway, I would hide under my desk and pretend I wasn't there. This is the kind of trauma. This is the kind of abuse that women in the workplace deal with. Now, mine was incredibly acute, and that's not the only time I experienced this. My field was a very male-dominated field. There was a lot still, and I really think a lot of this is getting worse because today, people that believe in sexism and misogyny as an actual true belief system, that women shouldn't do this, they shouldn't do that, they should do this, they should do that, they shouldn't wear this, they shouldn't wear that, blah, 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 blah. It's not as overt now, which is wonderful. I'm so glad people aren't running around being like super misogynistic and sexist overtly, right? So that's a good thing. Maybe that's progress. I'm not sure though. And I say this because it's still there. I see people every day in my wandering around the world that are absolutely sexist and misogynistic. Absolutely. And they're racist and they're bigoted and all kinds of things. And I'm obviously painting with a broad brush here, but from my personal experience. So people still think this. Their thinking has not gone away. It's still there. It's just now having to be repressed because people have caught on that they cannot say these things out loud. My best friends, the woke mob, are gonna come at them and call them these generalized names: sexist, racist, misogynistic, bigoted. And I think that people that still have these belief systems don't identify with those words, and they actually take offense to it because we all are the star in our own story and we're all heroes. So none of us think of ourselves as this whatever, right? That we are painted as. I'm a very progressive person, but there are some descriptions of progressive people that I would take offense to. I wouldn't self-identify that way. And I think I'm the hero in every story of my own. I think that's what everybody else thinks. I do not believe that people say to themselves, I'm going to get up and go be sexist today. Even if their behavior points to that and their words point to that, I don't think that's what they think. And again, it's all subjective. And also, what I think is racist or sexist, you may not think is racist or sexist. You may have a higher tolerance as a woman of dealing with sexism to the point where you laugh something off when another woman might take great offense. This is all a subjective conversation. But let me circle back to why I think things are getting worse. In my experience, it was the repression of the belief systems that I found out later actually were true. I'm not casting a judgment that is not based in anything. I found out later that these things were true. These were these folks' belief systems that I did not deserve to hold my office. And so instead of being able to come to me directly and say, I don't agree with you holding your office because you're a woman, because of your gender, only men should have your position, at least I would have known what the problem was, right? I would have known. When you're dealing with repressed isms, especially sexism, then those folks start to engage with you in more passive aggressive ways that don't make sense, ways that really gaslight you and make you feel, and I'm not using that term lightly. I mean, that term is thrown around all the time, but I'm actually like for real, what it means. Folks would say one thing to me and then they would turn around and say they never said it, for example. And I would be left standing there feeling stupid and crazy, like I invented it in my head when I knew I hadn't. These are not mental health issues. These are, I know what is true. I'm competent. I heard you. You said this thing. And now you're turning around and you're saying you never said it. And you're looking at me like I'm crazy. And I don't know if you're doing this on purpose. I don't know if you're confused, you don't remember saying it, but you are dying in a ditch over the fact that you did not say what you said you said. And how do you not feel nuts when that happens? And again, I don't take that lightly. I really believe that myself and other women that have experienced this, we do feel like we are having some kind of mental health issue because reality is no longer reality. What we know to be true is being told to us back that it's not. And that is the weirdest place to be. I mean, it is legit, if you know what this is, Twilight Zone stuff, like for real, wormhole into another galaxy or dimension. It is the weirdest feeling if you have experienced true gaslighting that leads you to cognitive dissonance, where you know the truth, but everything around you tells you that it's not true. That's crazy. It's really the weirdest feeling. And I experienced a lot of this. And I started to tip over this threshold that I didn't even know existed. And this is a formula that I'm writing about in my dissertation. So the first part is the gender bias gap that precedes us into our fields. The second part is this level of dysfunction that we did not know about walking into the position. It's not shared at the interviews. Maybe previous employees that we spoke to, for whatever reason, don't want to talk about it. They're afraid for their vocations and their reputations, or folks don't talk about it. So you don't know the level of dysfunction you're walking into until you're in it. Another part of this is back to our neurobiology. We don't know how our brains are going to respond in a significant pressure cooker vice situation until we're already in it. So that threshold that I'm talking about, it is subjective to each woman. The level of dysfunction, how high the gender bias gap is, and what our tolerance to this nonsense is. Again, it's a perfect storm. We don't know what that is until we're in it. And by the time you're in it, it's too late for solutions. And often you find yourself tipping over the edge into cognitive dissonance. You stop responding, you react. You don't like how that feels. And so you start to do bizarre things to get rid of the feeling. I mean, have you ever shot off a text too late at night or ruminated over something and then sent some weird email that was like, hey, by the way, I felt like you were, acting weird with me. And so I just wanted to blah, 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 and it doesn't make any sense really. And it doesn't actually make you feel better, even though you took an action that you hope the result would provide a better feeling. It actually just made it worse because now you're doing bizarro stuff. I see this a lot with the women I've talked about working in my research, just behaving as if they don't recognize themselves and going into fields. The women I'm talking to, and I would self-identify this way as well, we're all weird in our own rights. We all have our tics and strange things. But going into our field, we felt relatively normal, pretty even keel and not too this or that or the other. And leaving the field, a lot of women that I've talked to feel entirely different. Starting out, they felt normal-ish, as much normal as a human can be with all of our weirdness. And they left feeling entirely like a different human, broken and just changed. And I think that there is real neurobiological changes that happen because of neuroplasticity. And once we think something so often, we change that wiring in our brains and we start to believe it. You do believe you're a failure. Maybe you do believe these things are your fault. Maybe you do believe that everything people tell you is right and you're entirely wrong, even though you know you're not. You know you're competent, you're educated, you're trained, you're certified, you're experienced, you're fun and awesome. And suddenly you're none of those things somehow. Even what you know to be true is not true. This causes significant damage to women, and it happens all the time. And so the question is, what is your level of tolerance to these things? And you don't know that until you're experiencing them. It's this really strange formula. Running parallel with wondering what your tolerance is to this type of difficulty is the fact that you have to experience the difficulty in order to understand your level of tolerance of it. So that's not going to work. And this is why I believe we need to equip women to understand this stuff. It's like a bingo card. I can put on there, Mr. Bob Bear potentially will come in and yell at you like you are his daughter who, I don't know, snuck out or whatever. And you can check it off and go, hey, and after a week, you can say, hey, I got bingo. It's like all the stuff you said was going to happen happened because we know this stuff's going to happen. If you're in a dysfunctional system, if you're preceded by a significant gender bias gap of this repressed sexism and misogyny that starts coming out in weird ways, and you understand a lot of the passive aggressiveness that you're facing and the gaslighting comes from this repression. And it starts coming out in all these like weirdo ways because they can't come straight at you and say, you don't belong here. You're a woman. We're being forced in order to stay relevant to hire you, and you were the best of the bunch, and we resent it. And so instead, they want to come in and scream and yell at you about, I don't know. I'm trying to remember what Mr. Bear Bob yelled at me about. I think it was like a misprint or something. I don't know. It was ridiculous, And that wasn't the first time. He got after me. He really did. I mean, I got taken to task by that man many times over the most ridiculous stuff. Just the stuff that they did. It was like, really? So the point of this whole conversation today is this idea of how our brains take over when our brain believes we're under some kind of attack. And one of the great things that one of my coaches talks about is Brooke Castillo. She talks about the baseline of our brains is not happiness and joy. It is constant looking out for danger, constantly on alert, constantly looking for the bus that's going to hit us that we have to jump out of the way for. So by default, our brains are basically a nervous wreck, and we have to work at our happiness and joy. We have to work at that. It is not easy because that is not the default setting of our brains. Our entire parasympathetic system is made to keep us alive so that we can carry on the DNA of human beings. That's what this primitive system in our brains does. That's its only function. And another thing that's really interesting is the social piece of this. Well, okay, Charlie, so Mr. Bob Bear can't eat you, but he sure can, I don't know, destroy your reputation. Well, there's an explanation for that too, because that causes us significant anxiety and stress, worrying about, well, if we don't people please, if we don't this, if we don't that, then they're going to talk bad about us or whatever. Well, yeah, because again, in primitive times, you had to be a part of a community, a society, or the bear would eat you. So there was a conforming to the social etiquette, right, of whoever was in charge. And especially if you were a woman, pregnant or with children, you didn't have a lot of opportunity to cause any social difficulty because you would not be allowed to stay. And for men in that kind of system, they can choose to look out for a family, but they can also choose not to, right? A woman doesn't have that choice if she has children or is pregnant. It's not even for her that she would conform. It's for the babies. I would do that. I can't imagine risking getting kicked out of a social protective circle because I wanted to mouth off or whatever. Well, I mean, I do all the time, but I do it because I can. I'm not jeopardizing, my family's well-being necessarily when I mouth off. I don't know if I would have made it back then. I don't think I would have. I wouldn't have made it. The bear would have eaten me for sure, because I don't have a high tolerance for bullshit, and I've learned that. I don't tolerate it anymore. I did for a long time, but that's because I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't understand that there was a neurobiological reaction to conflict that was coming at me that my body was producing. It thought I was having panic attacks. I thought I'd done all this stuff wrong. I second-guessed myself. I mean, these are sort of defaults, not only for our brains, because our brains want us to survive and get it right and stay in society and not get eaten, but women are socialized to question. A male comes at you and says you've done something wrong. Sometimes our first thought is, well, we must have done something wrong. Duh. And that's not true. Plenty of us are competent and haven't done it wrong. But when some power player comes in and says you did because they're mad that you're a woman, it gets really complicated really quickly in our brains. All of those times, even if I'd done something, right? I mistyped something or whatever. And it still didn't warrant Mr. Bob Bear coming in and screaming at me, right? Yeah, you mess up. That's okay. You fix it. You ask, how can I help? How can I solve the problem? Let's solve the problem. That's what happens because humans screw stuff up all the time. By default, when you come in screaming at me about a mistake, what you're saying to me is that I have to be perfect, or it warrants you screaming at me. And the only way for me to keep you from screaming at me, seemingly, is for me not to make mistakes, because I don't see you trying to do any teamwork here and solve the problem. And that tells me right there, this is not about me, right there. But we don't think about that in the moment. Our brains don't let us because boom, amygdala hijacking, right? Cortisol rushing through our bodies, adrenaline rushing through our bodies, our heart rate kicking up. For me, the back of my neck and my head get really hot, and it's my flipping lizard brain kicking on. And it feels, I would think, like a panic attack. I'm not sure I've ever had one, really. I thought I'd had thousands of them, hundreds, I don't know, maybe thousands, but I don't think I did. I really think my body was getting ready to protect me, right? And what's funny is when you're in an office, you can't run away. Could you imagine? That'd be awesome. Like, that's not, we're also dealing with all of these socially appropriate and socially acceptable behaviors. And if I think that, Mr. Bob Bear is the bear that's going to eat me, well, then I should run away, right? But I can't in a professional setting. So now I'm stuck. I can't run away. And this particular person was very good because he would wait until really nobody was around, or maybe my assistant had already left or was at lunch. And that's when this would happen. And often for women, these types of hostile attacks happen in the shadows. These folks that perpetrate this stuff if this is your experience, and again, those are the folks I'm talking to. If this is not your experience, then I hope you'll pass this on to somebody whose is. But I know there's a lot of us out there. This kind of behavior happens in the shadows, where other people can't see them, where women cannot take it to anybody to help them because nobody's seen it. And often the people doing this are, like I said, power players, and maybe they're highly respected in the field or in the business. Maybe they're your boss or a highly respected coworker. For me, it was leadership that had been doing their work well for years, and it would have been his word against mine. And I know the folks I would have had to take this to had the same issues he did with me. I know that because it was a systems issue. The problem was in the system. I learned early on when I asked for help, the question typically was, well, what did you do to deserve it? Well, I didn't do anything to deserve getting screamed at, but I guess that you're going to overlook that and just assume that I did something to deserve it in a professional environment. Like, what? Again, that made me feel crazy. Guys, this is not okay. What is going on? I'm telling you, somebody's screaming at me. I'm telling you that I'm hiding under my desk. And your question to me is, what did I do to deserve it? That's so weird. I left that place so confused. I had no idea what the hell was going on. I had no idea. It was just absolutely insane. I mean, batshit crazy, bonkers, insane. And that's how I felt when I left. And the first thing people in my field who were supposed to be helping me would say is, well, do you have a therapist? Oh, well, yeah, I never thought of that, A. And B, well, it must be a mental health issue. It must not be a hostile and dysfunctional system that I'm working in. It must not be that I need help and support. It must not be that I need to be believed that this type of aggressive behavior is happening at me. No, it warrants a therapy session. Well, might as well get the bubble bath and the good smelling candles. I prefer vanilla if you're interested. So the greatest thing about what I have learned is the stuff that's based in science. It's the physiological and the neurobiological information about how my brain works, what's happening. Because once I have information, then I can do something about it. And that's my goal, is I would like to get you this information. So I really recommend you reading up more on the amygdala hijacking piece, because if you're anything like me and your body would go into some kind of reaction, and this goes too for people getting extra aggressive. I mean, I'm married to one. My husband is like a samurai with words. You come at him, he's going to take you out. Though I wish I had that skill, because he's really amazing at it. Oh my gosh, he's so good at it. But he's really professional too, which is great. But I know lots of people that aren't, and they go right at you, right at your jugular, and you're not going to keep a job that way either. So all of this reaction rather than responding is not going to help keep jobs. And when we're getting sort of baited into it in ways that we don't understand is happening, and we don't know the information. Now, when I feel that happening in my body, I say, oh, wow, where's the bear? Where do you think the bear is? Or who's going to throw us out of society and we're going to be totally on our own, and then the bear's going to eat us, right? I can identify it. And I can say, okay, there it is. All right, let's take it down. Let's calm, and let's kick in our prefrontal cortex. We have to do something. They say, and you can look this up, that they say, walk around. Do something that engages your thinking brain, like, I don't know, count numbers. Just move your body, walk around, get up, change locations where you are in response to where the person is standing. And that will begin to kickstart your brain. In your thinking brain will kickstart prefrontal cortex. And that is where we want to live. We want to live in the thinking brain when we're facing some level of aggressiveness or conflict. And people, they misdiagnose themselves as conflict averse. That may not be true. You may just be getting your brain hijacked. And those feelings, they're terrifying. And so the conclusion that you draw when you feel such terrifying emotions in your body is that you must not be good at conflict, right? That you are conflict averse, that you hate conflict. Well, that doesn't have to be true for you. It's just that you hate how it feels when your HPA axis comes online and tries to protect you from Mr. Bob Bear or whatever. That feels awful. And we want to get rid of that feeling as fast as we can. Here's the good news. So much of this is not about you. And that's impossible to believe. I know that, but I'm here to tell you. Once we start telling our stories and hearing our stories from each other and how similar they can be, and that's why I'm trying to tell some of mine, because if you hear anything that you relate to, that helps you understand you're not alone. If you're getting beat up in the shadows, if your amygdala is hijacking you, if your heart rate is going too fast and you can't think in the moment, yeah, because your lizard brain is in control. If you are dealing with the gaslighting and the cognitive dissonance, if you are dealing with people saying one thing and then saying they never said it in another moment. I had that happen once with one of my pregnancies before I had left for maternity leave. I asked if there was an option to come back part-time for a little while, just so I could have more time with my son. And initially I was told, yeah, we could do that. That's great. And so right before I left for maternity leave, I went back to my boss and I reminded him and I said, okay, well, what's the plan for coming back part-time? And he looked me in the eye and he said, that's not an option. You can't come back part-time. No, I'll fire you before you. I was like, wait, what? It was the weirdest thing. And I know he was really mad that I was a woman and I was having a child and I needed time off. And I know that really inconvenienced him and the team. And I had a lot of feelings about that I kept because I didn't understand why I thought he said one thing and then obviously he didn't. Did I invent it? Did I make it up? I mean, that's how we start second guessing ourselves. It's bonkers. So if any of this resonates with you, then you're one of my people. And I hope that some of this can help you. If you want to check in and maybe do a discovery call and talk about what's going on with you, and maybe if there's any way that I can be helpful to you, I would welcome it. Jump on the calendar, down there on my schedule, and let's chat. Okay, so real quick, just some housekeeping. I have some exciting news. I've started a Patreon. You can see that below. Y'all will help me keep my little show that I've started going. I'm so excited. If you feel like a helpful human, jump over there. I'm going to have some subscriptions, so different levels, and I will have goodies for folks, and that'll include discounts for the coaching studio products and live coaching sessions with me. Finally, I'm so excited. I'm offering a 6-part intensive masterclass this spring at an extremely low rate compared to what master certified coaches like myself would offer a masterclass to the public. I'm doing this because, again, I want to get as much of this information out as I possibly can to as many women as I possibly can. So the pricing is more inclusive to folks that can't afford the, thousands of dollars it costs regular masterclasses. And I'll be doing a 6-part deep dive intensive into a lot of what we've been talking about. And I'm so excited about what I titled part 1 of the course. How to be a boss bitch. Stay calm and confident no matter what. Well, yeah. there's ways to do that. And go to charliehornesscoaching.com/masterclass. And that's where all the information is. It's not only that I want to get this info out to as many women as I can this time, but you've also asked for it. I've had a lot of folks reach out and say they are interested in a more deep dive intensive on the stuff that I have experienced, I have learned, and I have been coached on. I want to provide this, but I want to do it at an inclusive price that isn't thousands and thousands of dollars. You asked for it and I provide. So run over to the website. You can pre-register. I will be opening the bookings for the live sessions starting Monday, February 12th. And that's coming up super quick. So if you're interested in this, reserve your spot now. Well, I hope you all have an amazing week, and thanks for sticking around with me, and I will see you next time.
Wait, if you're listening this far, you're probably wrestling with significant issues women face every day that Charlie Horness Coaching can help you with. If you're ready to transform your life from preventable suffering into a life full of purpose, satisfaction, success, and joy, the coaching practice will help you with that. Are you ready to invest in the most important asset you can? Well, that asset is yourself. Everything you will learn in this coaching practice, you will carry on throughout your entire life, constantly increasing your success. How can you go wrong with that? Investing in yourself is the greatest investment you can make, where you will see the most important and fastest returns. And now is the perfect time, because 2024 is going to be the perfect year to finally take the steps you've been wanting to take towards massive transformation your whole life. Join our other students in creating the life you've always wanted for yourself. Schedule your initial consultation call and let the transformation you've been craving begin. So what are you waiting for? It's time to make the greatest investment of your life in yourself and in the life you've always dreamed of. So let's get started. Visit charliehornesscoaching.com today. We'll see you there.